story begins with a famous boxer named Young. Young was only 16 years old, but due to his talent, he had become very well known throughout the entire city. One night, after winning a match, Young was very eager to go back home because his mother and sister were waiting for him there. But as soon as he arrived home, he saw that both of their bodies were lying there, and suddenly a man attacked him from behind. But because Young was a trained boxer, he easily saved himself and killed that murderer. 2 years later, in a school, some boys were talking about Young's story, that the people who had attacked his family were all thieves, but still Young had finished them all off with his boxing skills, and because of this, he was charged with murder and sent to prison. In that same class, there was also a boy named Sobin who had newly joined the school. Actually, Sobin used to be bullied a lot in his previous school, and to escape that, he had changed schools and gradually he had started to like the new school. But then the teacher brought a new boy named Tony into the class. Tony was also a boxer and he used to bully Sobin a lot in his previous school, so the moment Sobin saw him, he became very scared. As soon as the teacher left the class, Tony started beating some kids for no reason just to establish his dominance, after which he came towards Sobin to beat him. Sobin couldn't say anything in front of Tony, so one of his friends stepped in to try to save him, but Tony pushed that girl aside and raised his hand to slap her. But at that moment, for the first time in his life, Sobin gathered the courage to stop Tony. But seeing his courage only made Tony angrier. He made up his mind to beat him up properly. Meanwhile, to defend himself, Sobin picked up a pen, but seeing this, Tony wasn't going to stop. He kept provoking Sobin to use the pen. Hit me, you weak coward, hit me. And seeing himself in Tony's grip, without thinking, Sobin drove that pen into his eye. After this, Sobin was charged with attempted murder, but he couldn't say anything against Tony in court, and as a result, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison. To take him from court to prison, he was put on a bus where by luck, his seat was next to Young. Upon arriving at the prison, all the inmates were placed in separate cells, where Sobin befriended a thief named Min. Both of them were put in the same cell, where a man told them about the dynamics running in the prison. In that prison, there were 3 biggest inmates, Jun, Aki, and Han. Among them, Jun was a good man who stopped Aki and Han from bothering the other inmates. But then recently, Aki and Han had made a plan and framed Jun, because of which the police had locked him in a separate room, and since then Aki and Han had been busy troubling all the inmates. But the most powerful inmate there was still Young, whom everyone was very afraid of. But the good thing about Young was that he never fought without reason. The next day, Sobin and Min were quietly standing and watching the football match going on between Aki and Han's sides, but then 2 players got injured, after which Han called Sobin and Min to play with them, to which both of them quietly agreed. But Sobin didn't know how to play football very well, because of which Han's team was losing, and he wasn't going to take responsibility for that loss under any circumstances. So he closed his eyes and kicked the ball, but by mistake, that kick landed straight between Aki's legs, and because of the injury down there, Aki fell to the ground in pain. He was very angry, and so his men started dragging Sobin toward their cell. Meanwhile, Sobin was very scared and memories of the torture he had faced in his previous school were coming back to him, because of which he started begging them for mercy. But it had no effect on them. But then their eyes fell on Young, who was passing by nearby, and seeing him, they acted as if they were Sobin's friends. Seeing their behavior, Sobin understood that everyone in prison was afraid of Young, and to save himself, he immediately ran toward Young. Now Young didn't usually get involved in unnecessary matters, but seeing Sobin pleading like that in front of him, he decided to help him, and when Aki and Han tried to stop him, Young knocked him down with a single punch. The children in prison were also taught in classes, but during class, Aki's eyes were only on Sobin, whom he wanted to teach a lesson no matter what. Right after class, a guard took Sobin to meet someone, and this person was none other than Tony, whose one eye had now been completely ruined. He had also been expelled from school, because of which he was spending his life on the streets, and he believed that all of this had happened to him because of Sobin, and now he wanted to kill him no matter what. Hearing this, Sobin, as always, started begging him for his life, but Tony didn't care about that either. During class, Sobin's eyes fell on Young, who was training at that time, and seeing him, Sobin realized that he still had 2 years left before going outside, and if he learned boxing properly, he could save his own life. After this, he immediately went to make Young his trainer, to which Young first flatly refused because he thought that perhaps Sobin would misuse his abilities. But when Sobin told him about the treatment he had faced, Young became convinced that he would never go down the wrong path, and so he thought about helping Sobin. But to make Young his trainer, Sobin would have to pass a test in which he had to complete 100 laps of the ground in 40 minutes, and only after passing this test would Young train him. This training meant a great deal to Sobin, so he started running laps of the ground without stopping. And as he ran, all he could see before his eyes were images of the bad treatment he had suffered. And so he was ready to die but not to stop. By the last few rounds, Sobin was completely exhausted, so Young told him to stop. But Sobin had made up his mind to pass his test, and he only stopped after completing all 100 rounds. By then he was so exhausted that he was about to faint on the ground, but Young caught him. Seeing his condition, Young understood how important it was for him to learn boxing, and to help him, he first spoke to the jailer and got Sobin shifted to his room. Actually, the jailer was also a fan of Young, and he knew that Young wasn't a bad person. So he immediately shifted Sobin to Young's room. From the very next day, Young started training Sobin, but seeing Sobin's weak condition, he understood that he would have to work very hard on him. Meanwhile, Aki was also preparing to take his revenge, but then his associates reminded him about Min, who had been with Sobin that day, and they could perhaps use Min's help to separate Sobin from Young. Meanwhile, during training, Sobin had gotten very tired and now he wanted to rest, but then Young reminded him that he could never learn boxing with that kind of attitude. Hearing this, Sobin got back to exercising. He continued working hard like this for the next few days, and gradually his body began to change. During this time, a good friendship had also developed between Sobin and Young. Meanwhile, outside, Tony had started fighting all the gangsters in the city one by one, and one day during such a fight, a very big gangster noticed him and, seeing his ability, told him to work for him. But Tony wasn't ready for this, and so he disrespected that gangster, in response to which the gangster knocked him down with a single slap, and then gave Tony one last chance to accept his offer. Tony was in dire need of money, and so he agreed to work for that gangster. Meanwhile, in prison during lunch, Min told Sobin that within a few days, Young would be sent to the adult prison, after which there would be no one to protect Sobin from Aki. Hearing this, Sobin became very disheartened because Young hadn't told him anything about this, and so he immediately went to talk to Young. But Young explained to him that sooner or later he would have to fight for himself, and that time was coming soon. So taking his advice, Sobin got back to training. Meanwhile, Aki's men were bothering Min, but then Sobin arrived there, and when they tried to threaten Sobin, he beat them with his boxing skills. As soon as this news reached Aki, he told those two boys to quickly go and bring Sobin to him. But now those two were so afraid of Sobin's beating that they went to Sobin and asked him for help, after which he quietly went on his own to meet Aki, where he first apologized to Aki for his mistake. But Aki didn't care about that and he immediately attacked Sobin. But now this was not the same old Sobin. He also started fighting Aki in self-defense. But Aki was still stronger than him, and he used all his strength to knock Sobin to the ground, after which everyone thought the fight was over right there. But then suddenly Sobin stood up once again. This time he started beating Aki, and he kept beating him until Young stopped him, after which both of them quietly left from there. Meanwhile, Tony's fear in the city was growing very rapidly, and he was becoming more and more dangerous day by day. During his last training session with Young, Sobin had almost landed a punch on his face. But along with this, their time together also ended, because that very day Young was to be sent to the other prison. Before leaving, Young told him to always keep working hard. As soon as Young left the prison, June was also freed, which meant that now no one in the prison was going to bother anyone. But then Han challenged Sobin to a fight with the condition that if Sobin won, Han would never bother any inmate again, and they decided to meet 5 days later for this fight. Meanwhile, Tony came to meet Sobin again, because news of Sobin's training had spread even outside the prison. But instead of being scared, he was quite happy because now their fight was going to be a real match. A few days later, during the match, Han and Sobin were giving each other a tough fight, and even Han couldn't last long against Sobin's hard work, and accepting his defeat, he decided to fulfill his promise. After that day, no one in the prison was ever bothered again, and gradually all the leaders also became very good friends with each other. In this way, Sobin's 2 years of imprisonment also passed, and as soon as he stepped out of prison, he came face to face with Tony, who without saying a word started fighting him. During their fight, we saw that both of them were so agile that neither could land a single punch on the other. But after a while, Tony started beating Sobin just like before. But then, as Sobin lay on the ground, Young's face appeared before his eyes. He stood up again and started fighting, and this time, using a special technique that Young had taught him, he threw a punch that Tony, try as he might, could not get up from. After defeating Tony, Sobin quietly walked away from there. Despite the distance, his and Young's friendship was still intact. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.